Hello and welcome back to Ice World with me, Nadia Frontier, a marine biologist with the British Antarctic Survey, also known as BAS. In this podcast, we feature conversations with BAS members living and working in Antarctica who have seemingly ordinary jobs but are doing them in extraordinary places. That's our slogan, by the way. I've been part of the winter 2024 team for a short stint at King Edward Point Research Station located on the island of South Georgia. I spoke to Ashley Shinn, someone who I'd previously worked with at Rothera Research Station. Ashley, or Ash, is a mech tech, short for a mechanical technician, and without him, we'd have no heating, no clean water, and worse, no working toilet. Ash is an absolute Antarctic addict. He loves it and is already planning how to come back. But before he begins his next adventure, we sat down and had a chat about his time at King Edward Point and reflected on how it was different to his winter at Rothera. How long have you been at King Edward Point?
I arrived in February, so I've been here for 3 months now.
And your Rothera deployment was?
14 months, including a month travelling south on the Sir David Attenborough.
A very cool way to travel. Then you went to Scott Base.
Yes, I spent 6 months at Scott Base, and now we've come down here to KEP.
So essentially, for the last 2.5 years of your life, you have just been, or 3 years even, you've just been constantly in Antarctica since 2021.
Got a contract with BAS early 21 and did PDT in September, so I guess the whole adventure really started in September 2001.
Yeah, wow, and PDT is pre-deployment training.
Pre-deployment training, yeah.
Absolutely. So could you please give me a little bit of a summary about what your day-to-day life is, either at Rothera or at King Edward Point or at Scott Base? You can choose.
We'll start with Rothera. So the responsibilities with all the BAS stations, there's an awful lot of checking everything. We do reactive repairs, but the idea generally is preventative maintenance. Kind of tour around base, checking the various systems, the system that creates the water, the system with which we treat our wastes, things like that, and just always making sure the boilers are fine because you know how important they are, and we're also responsible for parts of the fueling system as well, along with the Genimex.
That's an absolutely huge responsibility. So you're essentially responsible for having running water and heating, two of the most crucial elements to keeping people alive on Antarctic research stations. So at Rothera, at the height of the season, you probably had, 150 people to manage essentially like sewage waste from and to keep boilers on in about 8 different buildings. Now at King Edward Point here, absolute stark contrast. You've got, at the height of the season, 22 people, and then in the winter, 8 people. So how is that contrast between Rothera, where there's so much more things that could go wrong and so many more things to maintain, compared to very different style at King Edward Point?
It's a much smaller bubble, so to do our checks at Rothera would take nearly till lunchtime, because we'd go around the various plant rooms in buildings and stuff like that, but here it can be done very, very quickly. Again, you just got to make sure everything ticks over properly. There's less going on here because we have hydroelectric power and we've got a fresh water supply, so we're not creating water. I've just got to make sure that pipe doesn't freeze, basically, so it's a lot less pressure with keeping the system going, and there is backups, whereas at Rothera, it's, you've just got to keep the RO running.
So what is the RO?
The RO is the Reverse Osmosis Plant. We extract seawater, and then we get the salt out of the seawater and create the pure water through a very complex machine that can be slightly temperamental at times.
So back to Rothera sewage treatment, how does that happen?
First, we have to pipe everything to a single point where I guess we store it and process it. So that's the STP, the sewage treatment plant. And so there's also quite a lot involved in that, because in some cases the sewage has to go uphill from the Bonnell laboratory. So these pipes have to be buried and trace heated to make sure they don't leak. And then they've all got to protected from freezing and also protected from the temperature. They need to just generally be protected from snow, because you can have like 12 foot of snow buildup, or once that starts to melt a little bit, it can be an extreme amount of weight and pressure on the pipework. A lot of things that we have to fix are just like pipe boxing became damaged or crushed, or you'll occasionally get a leak, or you'll occasionally get something like maybe the trace heating failed and then it froze. So there wasn't heaps of this, but every now and then you just get, it's an extremely hard environment on all of your external facilities. So there's lots of little bits of repair and that kind of thing. So yeah, it all goes to the sewage treatment plant. We treat it with microbiome and
then the fresh waters.
And get it as close to fresh water as we possibly can before the water's sent back to the sea, and then we send the solid waste back to the UK.
I think it was quite cool to see it at a small scale. We had a university field trip to a sewage treatment plant from the perspective of marine biology and how overflow sewage could then impact the rivers. So that was why we visited it. It was really cool to see it in Antarctica.
Yeah, I think the main difference with ours, other than the big ones, apart from its size, is that it's usually surrounded by sleeping elephant seals. So the first thing was, can you get into the building? First, is it covered in snow? And the second, do I have to climb over any seals to get into it? So they'll spend about 3 or 4 weeks leaning against the STP, and sometimes they can be in front of the doors or the hangers or whatever. So you've got to kind of try to move them. But they're good to chat to. They're good listeners, and they're generally all called Dave.
Yeah, not your average day in the office at all.
KP is really cool because there's just mountains and lakes quite high up, so we've got a water supply, but we're also powered by the hydroelectric turbine. So currently all of BAS's power is coming from that, which is brilliant, and we're using electric boilers here. So right now we're completely green, but as it gets colder, we might need to use the oil-fired boilers just for a little bit of additional heat if that's necessary.
How do you find working with a hydroelectric plant? Is that something new for you?
That is something very new for me, and it's another one of the kind of broad list of increasing skills you get working with BAS. So yeah, been learning about hydroelectric turbines, and that was steep learning curves. Again, at first it's a bit terrifying, but then you get to know your plant, and you get used to the whole thing, and now it's ticking along nicely.
So there's a path that essentially to get to the hydroelectric plant from the station, you go on a path, you go past an old whaling station, and then you go up a bit of a slope to get to the dam. Yep. So that's a pretty cool commute. Do you ever take a bike to get there? I've heard people cycle to the... My
partner Chris cycles there all the time. I prefer the walk myself, but in summer you're literally dodging hundreds of seals. They're just everywhere, and a good few penguins, so that's
pretty scenic.
Yeah.
What draws you to Antarctica? Why do you keep coming back?
I heard about it years and years ago, about 15 years ago on the radio, that Antarctica BAS needed tradesmen, and I thought about it for a little while. I was like, well, that sounds pretty cool. So I applied quite a long time ago. Unfortunately, at the time I didn't get in, and I applied a couple more times over the years, and it was actually 10 years later, just around COVID times, 2019, that I then reapplied. And that time I got it. I just imagined it'd be amazing, and lo and behold, it was amazing. And in my time south, I've done and seen the coolest things I've ever seen in my life, in various different ways, and I've met some of the coolest people I've ever met in my life. So it's all part of the experience of coming south, isn't it? I guess I also it turns out I'm quite suited to living on a base, living in the communal environment with a bunch of, I guess, like-minded weirdos.
I think you described it so beautifully right up until that point. It's true though. What would you say your favourite aspect about Antarctica is?
When you get to see it and experience it, it's just breathtaking. And like the things you experience, like your hands going numb so fast, or your goggles freezing, and then you have to take them off, and then your eyelashes freeze, and and that makes you cry, and then your tears freeze. And
Perfect depiction of it.
Even just going down and, spending most of my day plumbing and being in plant rooms, being part of that, and being able to support that in my own little way of just, keeping the boilers on, keeping the water flowing. Like, it's kind of does fill you with a sense of purpose, really. Like, it feels very good.
I think you've nailed it. I think the sense of purpose is the greatest one. I think it's somewhere you can have a measurable impact of how important your role is, because there's only one or two of you. What challenges do you encounter whilst being here from either a work or a personal perspective?
Well, I struggled a bit with insomnia in my first winter because my circadian rhythm got messed up with it being dark all the time. So I think that was one of my biggest challenges of my first winter, actually. And then obviously just, the lack of natural light and whatnot can affect your mood. The whole station gets a bit sleepy and a little bit grumpy and a little bit in kind of like semi-hibernation. So just staying motivated to, you've kind of got to give yourself a bit of a kick and make yourself be active, because it can be easy to fall into a bit of a slump during the winter months. You will miss certain things, like, I don't know, not being able to get a pizza or your favourite place you go for coffee or any of that kind of thing. And freshies, fresh fruit and veg is always a big one. We are fortunate that we get relief from the ship every, what is it, about 4 weeks, 6 weeks?
Yeah, so at King Edward Point, complete contrast to Rothera, where essentially at Rothera we were isolated for, let's say, 5 months, where we had no influx of post, fresh fruit, fresh veg, nothing. Now at King Edward Point, we're getting that fresh stuff once a month. It's absolute luxury.
Yeah, it really is, compared to what did we run out of onions and garlic?
It's awful.
And then we ran out of garlic powder, and we're trying to just make curries out of pretty much nothing.
If we went to Amnesty Scott, we would have a little bit of a shock, because it's actually colder than we've known. We almost need to go back down the latitude.
Well, at Scott Base, compared to Rothera, just because that's 10 degrees further south, it's so much colder, and you'll have weather there where you're just not allowed to go outside. They call it Con 1.
Really?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? That's fascinating.
Yeah, well, so I think because it's more extreme there, all the buildings are interconnected, so like you don't have to go outside unless you absolutely have to, or unless you want to. But in the extreme weather, when it gets above like 40, 50 knots and, it's minus 40 and you just total white out, you can't see anything, you're going to get lost. So yeah, you're literally not allowed outside in extreme weather. Whereas Rothera, we go outside in pretty much everything.
Yeah, we never ever had a day when we were told not to go out. Maybe we were told to take extra care when walking between buildings.
Yeah.
But I never experienced a ban of being able to go outside. I mean, that's just, I can't actually imagine that. I think I would I don't think I could do that. I would hate that. So Ash, what are your future plans? What do you intend to do after a winter at King Edward Point?
To be honest, King Edward Point is South Georgia is one of the most amazing, beautiful places I've ever been in my life, and I'm trying to look at ways that maybe I could come back in the future, maybe under different roles, or maybe with quite possibly one of those people that's just it keeps going south now. Like it's beginning to look like that. This being my third deployment, so like originally at the end of my first one, I just thought I was done, but I just keep coming back for more. It's a magical place, and just really fortunate to have the opportunity to be here. It's this kind of lifestyle that, if I'm honest about it, has probably got me hooked now. One thing I do find myself saying quite a lot is, like, it's amazing what becomes ordinary. So, like, your first time you sail south, I think there's a video of me the first time I saw an iceberg and I'm shrieking all high-pitched, going, "It's an iceberg!" And then, you stare at one for a year and it becomes, like, completely the norm. Or, it's for, like, penguins. I mean, I still absolutely love penguins. You can't have a bad day if you see a penguin, but just, like, say, going on my... I tried to make it a daily walk around the point at Rothera and seeing penguins, but then it's just that because it's happening to you every day, that becomes normal. Seeing penguins becomes normal. I mean, seeing whales is a much rarer one. Just the staggering beauty, or you see some, like a a seal pup doing something ridiculous that's really adorable. Like,
I think new people can make you realise that when they come in as well, because I completely agree. You can become a little bit like used to it. You're familiar with your environment. You might not necessarily go outside every single morning and be like, wow, what a beautiful morning, because also you have to live your life. But then new people come in and you almost like can't walk quickly with them because they're just looking around at everything, or like they keep telling you how amazing it is and you're just like, yep, I've had this. I've had this. But
brilliant.
What we really want to talk about is actually this Excel spreadsheet here. So if you please focus on that.
And obviously there's Shackleton's grave as well near that, so you go and pay your respects to the boss and give it a salute, because
an absolute legend.
We wouldn't be here without him, would we?
Well, thank you so much, Ash, for your interesting and funny insights. This has been such a good close to series 3 of the Ice World episode, where we've heard so many stories and tales from all the different jobs in Antarctica. So it's really nice to finish with you. So thank you for joining me.
Cool, thanks very much.
As you've heard, all aspects of living and working on the continent have to be managed with human support and input. It is rewarding and unique. And if you're a plumber or heating engineer or have skills in any kind of support role, do check out the job section of the British Antarctic Survey website, where openings at the many bases are posted regularly. Unfortunately, seal wrangling does have to be learned on the job. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please do tell people and take some time to write a nice review. It really does help us spread the word. We are coming to the end of season 3 of the podcast, where we have explored almost every wintering role available on the British Antarctic Survey's research stations. The next episode will be an interview of what it's like to be a marine biologist at Rothera Research Station, featuring myself. So let's see how that goes. I'm Nadia Frontier, and thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Ice World podcast.